Geillan belonged to a strong and simple people. They had not tasted the draught that swept much of the world like a plague, the sweet taste of trade and increase. Trade had always been a part of life. However, elsewhere, sparkling treasures had been harvested from deep caverns. Craftsmen had learned to make beautiful gifts. Groups coalesced to amass these things and naturally to protect them. And always in time they resolved to take more from others. Just beyond the lands where greed drew blood and raised castles, Geillan's island lay like a moss-covered stone, blissfully unaware of the strain of desire toward which the world was bending. It was with a trembling impatience that Geillan stood before the Chieftess. He sought Shauna's permission to travel through the wood to the port city to seek news of his father. She had dismissed the small children for the day. As he spoke, she smiled and nodded thoughtfully. Her knotted hands moved briskly over a piece of leather, working sinew thread to stitch a fur lining into a mitten. After barely a moment's pause, her eyebrows rose attentively. She said, "Geillan, since your boyhood at my feet, you have had a fire in you which needs quenching. There is good reason to fear what you may do to quench it." But her voice trailed away as she raised her eyebrows again and glanced thoughtfully around the hall at the blue painted designs illuminated by the fire. Shauna went on, "But for you, I am certain seeking your father is the first step. It may go well for you, and it may not. It may go well for your father, and it may not. You fight to quench the fire, and it will only burn hotter. When the heat is great, perhaps you will understand the only means of ending it." Geillan replied, "Thank you, grandmother. Begging your pardon, but the port is but a half-day's walk from here. I give you my word, I will return by morning of the following day." Shanna sighed and smiled. "Of course, my bold boy. I do not require your word, for sadly it means less than you mean for it to. You may go in the morning with my blessing." Manach spoke as if throwing words over his shoulder through the wind. "You are young, and full of wondrous foolishness which you will defend, possibly to your early death. I was young once, and at least as foolish and equally brimming with piss and vinegar. The few remaining strands of silver hair danced like smoke about his head." He glanced back at Geillan. "You were a hunter, yes?" Geillan nodded. "So was I, but I was also hunted. I was both a fine hunter and crafty prey. I travelled far and wide to avoid capture. When I was cornered, I did what all cornered animals do. I fought tooth and claw and lost. I reckon you will do the same." Here, Manach stopped and turned. He leaned down and looked straight at Geillan, his countenance softening. He continued, "Though I am old, I am far from wise. In fact, every day I spend out here in the sea spray, I understand how deep my lack of wisdom is.